Turn on.
Cause the weakest man see how he
Tune in.
The Satanist, the black magician, is not seeking that kind of
I think we're very control. When we keep the calculations, more or less, sorry, for someone that I have 4 years.
Dr. Hans Utter, welcome back to the Gnostic Media Podcast for our Laying the Dead to Rest episode, part 3. And I'd give you a long introduction, Hans, but you've been on the show like over 20 times or so, and just about everybody knows who you are by the time we get to part 3 of this series, our third series, on top of all of the extra installments and things we've done on RBN and UnSpun, on CCN, etc. So welcome to the show, and it's good to have you back.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that.
And this is, let me just interrupt you before you go on. This is our part 3 of our 2-part series on the Grateful Dead, laying the dead to rest. so this is actually going over because, like usual, we've always ended up having way more material to present than we started off thinking we had.
Yeah, no, that's always the case. I'd just like to ask listeners, if they're so inclined, check out my website, hansutter.com. I got CDs for sale, and I'm hopefully, and as soon as I get some of my books out, I've got 4 books now going on, and this is November is writing month, so that's what I'm doing. I'm writing, and in between, driving around and listening to my Grateful Dead cassettes with my bong. Other than that, just kidding. Just trying to write.
With a sheet of acid in your wallet.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make just a couple points to start out with. I've seen some comments online, a couple people saying that I'm doing this to like cash in. Well, I certainly, in no way I've cashed in.
How are we cashing in, dude?
Or trying to make money off of this. But I want to say that a big part of it is that, especially with the Grateful Dead, this was intended as sort of a case study, because with the other series didn't have time to go into depth. But I know at least about a dozen people personally, including people that I knew, from high school and stuff, that ended up absolutely destroyed from following the Dead. Either dead or absolute wasteoids, life completely ruined. And these were very promising scholars, athletes, whatever. And so this is not a joke. I mean, this is
payback, sons of bitches, for screwing with our lives and our friends' lives and sending us on these, down these drug rabbit holes and stuff for years, following the Dead, following Terrence McKenna, following Leary, following the rest of these CIA guys that we've spent the last 5 years exposing on so many levels, Hans, and I've talked many times about my friend Dave, who is a big Deadhead, and his whole life was based around rocker philosophy, and he always told everyone he was going to be dead by 27. When he wasn't dead by 27, he came down with he had severe wheat celiac problems like me, and at 40 years old, he put his 38 to his forehead and killed himself.
Yeah.
And it was all based on rocker philosophy. I sat there in the church during his funeral, where his music of choice was the Grateful Dead. So, you know what? I get you, dude, and all these people who want to use circumstantial ad hominem attacks, killing the messenger to avoid the information we're saying, they're full of shit. They can check the citations, they can check the work. We've provided everything. There's no hidden agenda here. And I get this kind of crap all the time, too, from people who contact me. How dare you say that about Leary or Kesey or Hoffman or or McKenna or any of these guys, when we haven't presented anything we don't have evidence for. If they want to cherry pick one out of the whole picture and idolize him like McKenna or whatever, that they, that he wasn't dirty, that he didn't admit that he was recruited, if they want to actually believe that he was talking about the mushrooms recruiting him or UFOs, then go believe that delusional bullshit. But you know what? McKenna and all these other guys admitted it. Wasson admitted that Hoffman was CIA. McKenna admitted he was recruited. Leary admitted he was CIA. He admitted Kesey was CIA.
Because it was part of the coolness of the Los Angeles cell, whatever you want to call it, that they kept a, you kept a...
Well, you might not call it a cell. Let's call it a cluster.
Our undercover agents in Los Angeles were very cool about, and yet they did more in a very laid-back way. And it's never been as public as some of the other, you know, the buses running around the country paying.
We can see Bob Weir admitting that he's at Bohemian Grove. We can see Bob Weir in these interviews using all this candid or all this coded language that he was working with the CIA.
So this is not the legendary Cornell University.
We don't have those tapes in the vaults, so until we do.
We can't talk about that.
What Cornell show?
Well, the Cornell. Oh,
The Cornell show.
Well, you know,
I
come on.
turn
It's been a long time. I think it's unclassified.
Okay.
We can let them know that
I think it's unclassified. What the deal is that legendary Cornell show never happened.
It is true.
You know,
We never wanted to tell
a lot
anybody.
of folks think they were there. All these folks. If you think you were there, just ask yourself,
Right.
were you in a 7-Eleven or a Burger King or something like that, and somebody came up to you, somebody from the company, came up to you and said, wait, you look like just the kind of guy who might dig this hat. And it was sort of a kind of a well-made, sort of semi-elegant tinfoil hat. And if you people would put it on.
Style at the time.
Well, this is the first time we're ever talking about this, man.
Well,
They
it's
told us
not
to talk
classified
about
anymore. We can talk about
It's been
it.
35 years.
And
Wait, is the CIA? They're gone, right? Oh, no,
the,
they know
the company,
everything.
man, the company.
That's right. They're listening anyway. It don't matter now. What? They hear everything, right?
So the company had us do. We were playing over here in San Rafael at Front Street, our studio, and it was a very successful experiment. People still to this day think that concert actually happened.
They enjoyed themselves too.
And they enjoyed themselves thoroughly, and that's the great thing, man.
That's a good thing to use mind control for, to
Yeah.
make people have a good time, I think.
Absolutely. I mean,
If you're gonna have a good time.
where's the downside there?
Everybody thinks that you guys played great that night too.
Yeah.
And the rest of the Grateful Dead, and every other goddamn pop hero out there, all the big ones, if they're not leaders in this, they're probably monarched, which we've shown in our 7-part music series, so they can go back to that and start at the beginning and look at all of this research and data that we've laid out over the last 2 years and come back and make an intelligent argument. But you know what? Nobody is willing to do that, Hans. All they do is make up these ad hominem attacks against us.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And in this this part, which hopefully will be the last part if we can get all the material in, but basically the material is, I found, to be so heavy, or at least there's enough in their own words with a little bit of background, a little bit of elaboration of what they're talking about, that I don't need to valence it in any way. You know, I don't need to valence this material. It is there on the surface, right? And this is not even going into the lyrics, going into the whole symbology, all these other aspects. So we're going to cover, you know, a wide array of this. And I want to say the show in memoriam to one of my friends, Todd. And he was, you know, one of my good friends. He was sort of the all-American boy. He was an athlete. He was well, if he's still alive, if he sues me, that's fine. But maybe he pulled himself together if he's still alive. But he's the one who started trying to get me into LSD, you know, and like late into, you know, junior year or whatever. And so, you know, he was like a physics genius, or, you know, he went into it so deeply. He used to sit there, you know, he was talking about the clear light. He was a total Leary head. He was, you know, way into the dead, traveling with the dead. And I saw him about 5 years after high school, and he was driving around with a bunch of other deadheads in a minivan, and he was literally panhandling on the street, and he was being looked at by all these Ivy League schools, and he was an absolute wastoid. He was gone. Now, if his if you want to blank out his last name or anyone listens to that, but that guy was one of those people that. And I want to state that, when you get into this, there is certainly a lot of things that are wrong with the society. We have all this social conditioning, et cetera, et cetera. I can go through that. But the fact is that what this does is create an avenue, not only rebellion, but an avenue where you think you're going to make the world a better place. And as you go into it, it's like, whether or not the gateway drug theory is correct, as you go into it, you get deeper and deeper involved. But at the same time, there's a lot of processing that's going on. And you're not aware of it. And by the time you may wake up, you may never be able to get out because your brain has been so manipulated that you may never recover your mind. And I would like to recommend Scanner Darkly, which is a Philip K. Dick novel, which is, much better than the film. That book really goes into this in kind of a deep way within a science fiction context. But, I think it's an important book to kind of look at this for someone who sort of survived that drug culture. Well, let me go ahead and just dive in here so we don't waste our precious time, even though, as we'll see, the Grateful Dead are moving towards a trans-temporal, non-temporal reality, so to speak, a cyclical dimension of time, which everything is geared towards. But what we are looking at here is actually, we talk about alchemical transformation, and I want to go into this in just a little bit of detail because I've brought this up and people bring this up, but I want to just give a little bit of background information. So, for example, we'll hear a clip where Owsley references the 7 stages of alchemical transformation. What are those 7 stages? How do they apply? And how is this being used as a mode of psychological transformation? And basically, the Grateful Dead, are fully conscious, very much fully conscious players in this process, right? So we're talking about a process of absolute social transformation, which we'll get into, but they are fully aware of what they're doing and they're fully cognizant of this. But let's just start out with just looking at Hank Harrison's book, and just in another, as we've talked about, and we could do a whole series on Saul Alinsky, who Mrs. Clinton, the hopefully, possibly not, or whatever, the soon-to-be president of America.
Hillary for prison.
But she was, a disciple of Saul Alinsky, and she wrote a very complimentary thesis that they tried to suppress for a long time. That thesis is now available. But Saul Alinsky, again, a major player in this idea of transforming society, creating social chaos, how to create social movements, George Soros model. People can look into that themselves. Hank Harrison, the Grateful Dead's first manager, was a protege of who? Saul Alinsky. And as people have mentioned, if you read his book, Rules for Radicals, it's dedicated to Lucifer, and we'll see why that makes sense. So we go to Hank Harrison's book, and we look at the first picture in there is a picture of Mr. Harrison at the Presidio gun range. And then the second picture is a picture of Moon Unit Zappa, Frank Zappa's daughter, with the GTOs. It's kind of a disturbing, kind of a creepy picture if you look at them there. And in fact, it looks kind of demonic, actually, the way the girl's looking at her. And, they have the Indian feather. She has a feather in her head, lots of weird symbolism. Well, Presidio, California, has been connected with a variety of satanic cults. This particular area has been alleged, and there is some evidence that it's been used for mind control programming, for MK Ultra, for occult indoctrination. So he's standing in front of this place, this gun emplacement, which has been used for a variety of MK Ultra / occult type ritual practices. There's a large circular Greek column there in that underground place he's standing in front of. And this is also connected with the Letterman Hospital, which was also an MK Ultra hospital, as well as a variety of tunnels connecting these places, and the child sex abuse scandals in the 1980s that came out of there, Michael Aquino, Temple of Set, all this stuff coming directly out of Presidio. So if you look at him, why would he choose that picture? The next picture is a little girl with two very psychotic looking women, one of whom is holding a baby bottle. And it's a little bit disturbing if you put it in the context of Presidio. Again, being used, for child, sacrifice, types of cults. And just another thing, sorry to start this off on a downer, but there's an article which I'll send you on about mass graves found near Montreal, and used for basically this kind of child sacrifice and all this stuff going on. And guess what they called where they buried the bodies? The pigsty, just like the pig pen. And this was contemporaneous with all the 1960 stuff going on, these things going on across the border in Canada. So all this stuff is interconnected and interrelated.
It sounds to me like another anti-gentile joke, Excuse me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, the hog farm, but the pigsty is where these kids were murdered. They found more than 50,000 children are said to be illegally experimented upon. So again, you could, maybe these images are not connected. Now let's go to the third image in the Dead Book, and we see the Grateful Dead guy wearing the skull, holding up a wonderful kind of a skull on a pole, a skull on a pole. All right, so a little bit creepy, but in fact, very creepy in a certain degree if you put these three images in context with the Presidio, with the, Moonian and Zappa, with the very creepy women, and then this guy. And then, if you don't mind throwing up a fourth picture, this is a picture of pre-Columbian child sacrifice art or, excavations. And you can see this is from a pre-Columbian child sacrifice cult. And you can see a little bit of quite similarity in the iconography of that. And then, I won't go overboard on this, but you can see the pole he's holding and the pole of the skull. These three pictures are what you could describe as A, revelation of the method, but B, also cluing off people that are insiders into this material. But anyways, this may sound like perhaps speculation or guilt by association, but as we get into this material, we'll see that this is perhaps not the case. And so the social transformation that the Grateful Dead is going to be discussing, and we'll listen to them discuss it in their own words, is something that has been alluded to and been discussed rather openly. The United Nations had various meetings regarding to this, and this is found throughout a whole variety of literature, psychology, etc. This whole idea that, the world is broken and we have to fix it, but we have to break down society first. And of course, Aquarian conspiracy, etc., etc. So we've covered that before. But let me now go into this idea of alchemy, because this is something, again, referenced by Owsley especially, but by other members of the Dead, and what alchemy means. And this is kind of like the Hegelian dialectic, which should be called the Eichian dialectic, not the Hegelian dialectic as it's used, right? This idea of problem, reaction, solution is a real simplification. But the Grateful Dead, as I would posit here, is that they are someone who is actually engaged in what I would call a dialectical transformation. So dialectical social transformation is, say, you have capitalism, you have an agrarian society, and they're competing, and then these two opposite thesis and antithesis. They'll create a synthesis, which is a social transformation, not like, okay, Republican, Democrat. That's not a transformation. But this case, when you're talking about large-scale social transformation, that indeed is a dialectical process, much as Marxism is, much as alchemy is, as a psychological practice, and in fact is very much embedded into a lot of different occult things. So alchemy, of course, is, we know it from the Middle Ages as being something that was used to, we're trying to, these whacked out or very intelligent, introspective gentlemen were trying to transform lead into gold. But remember, as Carl Jung kind of brought forth, at least to the general public, this is actually a process of individual psychological transformation or social transformation, or both at the same time. And so
it's not just about metals, it's also about transforming people in society.
In fact, that's primarily what it's about, and I'll explain why. And when we hear the audio clip, I think I have that there, we played it before, where Owsley references the 7 stages of alchemy. Let me just go through these real quickly. We have calcination. So this is where, in the Arcanum experiment, the matter is heated. You heat a substance until it's reduced to ashes, okay? And this is the sulfuric acid that starts to dissolve or create this ash. And you can see this burning or breaking away of society as we can apply these stages to, for example, the counterculture, right? So you have a thing of where there's heated, the pressure starts to build. You have Vietnam War, you have Kennedy assassination, you have, whatever that may be, right? So that's the first stage, calcination. The next stage is that of, and I'm going to talk now just about the psychological aspect, not the chemical processes, but these are not considered to be distinct. Dissolution. So this is starting to break down the structures of the psyche. So again, if those people are interested, you can go through the chemical stuff. I'm just going to talk psychologically, so I don't take 3 hours to go through this. But this is where you start to break down the frameworks of the mind. You start to break down belief systems. You start to dissolve the barriers between the conscious and unconscious mind. But this is something, this dissolution stage is something that is not, the participants are not consciously aware of it, right? Okay. The third one is separation. Okay, and this is where after this, the heating up stage has happened, the dissolution stage, then the individual becomes aware that they are separated, and they start to look for this hidden essence, which is gold, right? This is the one substance, prima materia, which we'll talk about what that actually is. The prima materia is the gold of who we are. Now we have a quest or a goal. Conjunction. The other ones are conjunction, where you go to the hermaphrodite stage, where it's both male and female at the same time, the merging of the masculine and the feminine, the fermentation, and this goes through, et cetera, distillation, which is, now we're talking about the whole society is now being distilled, and finally coagulation. You've created a new world. You've created an entirely transformed individual or a society. But the goal is this prima materia. Okay, in alchemy, as the material or chemical sense, that is gold, which is, but the lead, we see the lead, the base element, which is social forms, which is rational thought, which is families, which is culture, which is philosophy, which is history, which is our own barriers in our mind, which is also the distinction between the sexes. So basically every rule in terms of this process as applied by those who are invested in it and in fact do apply to society, the lead is itself society as it is, right? We talked about this in depth. And we're witnessing a certain stage. And I mentioned to you that before, this whole transgender thing is part of these stages of alchemical transformation. But let's look at prima materia. Prima materia is basically it's the individual unconscious. It is the collective unconscious, but it also could be described as a type of divine. It's an unknown substance within each individual. And basically, and this is coming from primarily Carl Jung. You can look at like Man and His Symbols, a variety of other Carl Jung's work into this, and you can go to the original text. But prima materia is, in a sense, on one level, it's the gold of what we could be, but it is also the projections of our own mind that we view as external to us, right? So part of the alchemical transformation is breaking down the barriers between the subconscious and unconscious mind, between the individual's perceptions or of the world and the world itself. But prima materia is also linked to Saturn or Chronos. It is linked to the Soviet Union with the hammer and sickle. The symbol of Chronos is the one who cuts down. Saturn is a symbol of the devil. The Saturn is the devil meaning the quote unquote negative father, the repressed aspects of this social, and that's why the movement into this process is considered to lead potentially to madness or bedevilment. So you're opening up the floodgates. But this, I'm sorry. So that let me back up. So but the prima materia, again. So we're transforming this, but by transforming the lead of society, that is the lead of our perceptions, we're releasing this darkness, right? This Saturn, these destructive forces. Okay. And so the transformation, again, before it becomes gold, in fact, we're looking at the worship or the process of Saturn and the breakdown of everything. So let's now move to start with the dead talking. I don't know if you want to throw something in there, Jan.
What we see is this happening, going back to the Maya and the Aztecs. We see this death cult that they are using as part of the foundation, along with Hinduism and Buddhism, etc. And I covered this in the recent UnSpun episode with Joe on Teonanacatl, the sacred mushroom of sacrifice and suicide. But they are taking this and then they transform it into this religion, New Age religion of enlightenment and all of this stuff, which when you go through the 16th century Aztec and Spanish reports, it was nothing like they portray it in the books. And then they use this false image to, again, break people, not to uplift them, but they sell it as upliftment when it's suppression and mind control to supposedly evolve the people. But, the only thing that's getting transformed alchemically, Hans, is that the masses are being pushed into extinction, especially the middle class and Europeans, and this is promoted as spiritual evolution when the only thing that's being evolved is the elite who are running this whole mind control program.
Yeah, and like I said, I could go into this in a lot more detail, but I just want to give a quote from Carl Jung about prima materia. Carl Jung says, quote, "It is a characteristic of the arcane esoteric substance to have everything it needs. It is a fully autonomous being, like the dragon, Ouroboros, that begets, reproduces, slays, and devours itself, a being without beginning or end, and in need of no second. Such a thing can be, by definition, only God himself. Okay? So remember, we played that Playboy link, and he's talking about the snake. Jerry's talking
the
about
Ouroboros, right?
Devouring itself. Okay, so here we go. This is a little bit of Owsley talking about the occult background.
Well, if you can't describe what you were doing with acid before, can you describe what was different about what the Kesey outfit was doing with it?
Well, it was magic. It took you into a place that was like the descriptions in the books by the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, and it made sense of all the different occult things that I'd read. It was the introduction to magic. It was a pathway to another place, and it seemed to give you access to mental powers that were written about and talked about, both amongst the Hindus and amongst the ancient alchemists and magicians, and seemed to go direct, give you the access to those things. It was like a tool to work on the consciousness. Although the material always gave me great visions, incredible visions. I'm sure that it's the root source of the art that I do, even today. I'm sure it was the root source of my ability to manipulate sound, which I looked at as an art form. I never looked at myself as an engineer anymore, and I looked at myself as a chemist or anything else, not a scientist. I have a scientific background, but because I'm interested in everything. And science is just a way of describing the physical universe. And alchemy and the occult is just a way of describing the non-physical universe. And I was interested in both aspects. And art is a way of creating something yourself as a man, which can say something about either the physical, the non-physical, or both.
Yeah. I was going to say that somewhere along the line there's a bridge between the two, or comparing and contrasting those things.
Well, I like spatiality. One of the earliest things that happened.
Okay, stop it there. So, and you notice that he's not saying that I had visions of Jesus or the Buddha. I didn't have visions of interconnection with nature. I had visions, Rosicrucian, Freemason, occult, magic with a K. So right there, I don't think I need to say anything more. Like I said, we could do an entire series just on this, but I don't know if you want to chime in there at all or say anything.
We've already covered so much of this stuff, and with Steve Outram as well, and we're not here to teach people how the occult dark magic works. We're here to teach people that it's going on and how to protect themselves from it if they want to study it more so that they can understand it more to protect themselves. They can do that, but it's our job here is to make them aware that it's going on.
Yep. And as we move forward with these examples, we'll see the exact delineation of the ranges of society that are being alchemically transformed, so to speak. So let's just go on. Owsley's going to say something very briefly about religion.
What passes for spiritualism among the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant types is pretty...
Well, it's more than just Protestant.
The whole Judeo-Christian thing is pretty anti-mystical.
Judeo-Christian Islamic is the soldiers' religion. It was from ancient day.
We're finding that out in a major way right now, aren't we?
So that's very brief, but okay, white Judeo-Christian Anglo-Saxon Protestant is the lead that has to be manipulated or destroyed. But just noticing Mr. Peace and Love Owsley is alluding to the war on terror, right? Islam is a religion of war and soldiers. I have him talking about that quite a lot later, but just wanted, so right there he's kind of delineating who the enemy is, who the lead is that you have to summon Saturn, Kronos to destroy or transform.
Along with Pan and all the rest of them that they summon.
Yep. Now let's one more quote here from Owsley, or another thing he's going to talk about.
Understanding the rules by which the universe was put together, they could extrapolate these rules into the unseen universe and into other things. Because alchemy teaches that as above, so below. If you understand something that works on one level, you can understand it on another. And a common example of this is the similarity, the structure of the solar system and the structure of an atom.
Okay. Just so as above, so below. Very important axiom. And how this applies is that as you begin this process of transformation on one dimension, that could be a certain segment of society, right? It could be a psychological aspect, either individual or mass psychological aspect. Obviously, whatever that may be, you're transforming other domains, right? So if you transform the individual psychology, you're going to transform how they relate to people, but also you can look at a phenomena like countercultural phenomena as being something that is taking place again on an individual level, on a group collective level, but that's also working to transform the society itself. Exactly. Again, as above, so below.
And then through Burning Man is the same process all over again, where they're actually creating a gateway in the desert floor to summon Pan or Satan or whatever you want to call it. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then you have, of course, the very pleasant topic. No, I'm being facetious there, but the child sacrifice stuff. There's a recent article about how the guys in some of these IT gurus in Silicon Valley are now drinking children's blood. So they're getting these injections, but basically they're out in the open. We're drinking children's blood. Because it gives revitalization. I think the guy hopefully he doesn't cancel my PayPal account, but I think Bob Thiel is also getting these treatments. So that's so this is stuff again. As you go through, there's certain things that would not, if you did this in 1950, you'd probably be locked up or whatever. But now this stuff is coming more and more in the open, right? And again, we talk about the transgender thing. This shows the stage of the alchemical transformation that society is on. And in fact, I would say, with a lot of other sources, provides direct evidence that this is actually being utilized on a mass scale. Now let's move to the Grateful Dead. Okay, now, so the Grateful Dead are talking about themselves as a family, right? And I want to give them as much time to speak for themselves so again, if people say I have an agenda, let's listen to what they're saying. And if you're on board with that agenda, more power to you. But basically, they are on this agenda. So to start out with, we're looking at what aspects do the Grateful Dead aim to alchemically transform in society? We're going to start out with the family. So for the Dead are talking about the Dead family. Neil Cassidy was their father. And we've looked at Neil Cassidy already, the speed freak who's been imputed to be into heavy, S&M, beating up his wife, just pretty much a crazed maniac. And it was one of the main people in the acid test, of course, which we've covered. So let's listen to Jerry talking about as they broke away from our horrible structured family system and the horrible, life where you have to respect your parents and all this, how they created a new family in a microcosm, starting with the Merry Pranksters and, moving out to the world. So let's listen to that.
Yeah, and then the intermediate step being these groups of deadheads following the dead around. And, so this is like, from the Merry Pranksters to this, and then to this large one going on again with Burning Man, etc., and then expanding it out further to the world.
Yeah. And again, I want to stress the point that in these candid moments, they are not talking like the stoner burnout guitarist or whatever. They're talking among equals to people that are in the know and talking about what they're doing. And so they're going to, exactly what you said, we're going to listen to them talk about that agenda and how it's working and how they're implementing it. But we'll start out with Neil Cassidy.
Yeah, fair nonetheless by illustration. He provided a model for something about how far you could take yourself, kind of. And he also represented the thing of the individual outside of everything in a way.
Okay, so that's Jerry again talking about Neil Cassidy as the model for the great American hero, for the cosmic explorer, for the new man, right? For the, you know what I mean? Like in this era, this is if you want to be a man of your times and push yourself to the threshold and become, later on they describe Neil Cassidy as God. He became our God. But
right.
Now I don't think it's metaphorical.
Well,
but,
and you have to do a complete wipeout by the age of 42 and be dead a year into the summer of love, I mean, he died in 68.
And so again, he's the model for how to live, how far you could take yourself.
Right, exactly. So it's not about building or extending anything. It's about being as reckless and irresponsible and drug-laden and using this as the father figure. And then if you go back and look at, all the dead rock stars at 27 and look at my buddy killing himself at age 40 and stuff, I mean, here's this Neil Cassidy father figure setting the example.
Exactly. Well, let's listen a little bit more about the father figure of Neil Cassidy.
It's hard to describe exactly how, because we all had different. It's like we all saw different aspects in Neil. He'd show different aspects of himself to everybody, and he had that thing of being able to refer to lots and lots of different things in one conversation. Keep lots of levels going. Some of them you knew about, some of them you didn't know about. But there would be a continuity there. Each time that you talked to him, he would pick up from where you left off last time you'd seen him, even if it had been months.
If there was something on your mind, if you had a problem or an observation or something, you'd bring it to Dad. You'd bring it to Neil. If there was something on your mind, you'd bounce it off him.
Yeah.
And it sure as hell would bounce.
Yeah. And so he filled that role of that thing of where so who do you go to for advice? Ask Dad.
So Dad is gone.
Dad's gone.
And so in the fashion of families, those nuclear families, the old world style, or old style, not just old world, but like Asian families, the big Asian
and talk
families,
about
whatever.
new world order, old world style is destroy the family again, as we've been exposing.
Let's listen to this. Yeah, and he said he's God, and this is the model. They say he is a spiritual godfather. But we'll continue. Here we go. So I just for your notes, it's 1 minute 26 seconds. I paused it. Here we go.
You live. You live by more or less in your own adapted way, following the guy's footsteps.
How would Dad have done this?
Right, something like that. Yeah, right. Filtered through all other experiences that have been subsequent, stuff.
And then slowly you become your own man.
Yeah.
Well, you guys were pretty young when you met him, right?
Oh yeah, early 20s. Well, he was in his teens,
I was
but the rest of us,
teens.
we were all malleable, young and but even he existed for us as a. Before that, he was the guy speaking to us from pages of Kerouac.
That's right. Me too.
Right.
And for Kerouac, he was this kid who exemplified something happening.
Right. He was a breeze, some kind of incredible, super American mythos personality blasting through the highways of 1947 America.
Yes, and 1947 America blasted off.
Yes.
and it blasted off so successfully that there's an illusion that it didn't happen.
Right, right.
Like people reading Interview magazine think, well, these guys they're a remnant of something that happened once. But what happened once actually turned everything inside out.
That's right.
We're living in it.
America is more a reflection. I mean, America owes more to that period of time than it realizes, I think, culturally.
It's still working, and it's still working right well for us.
Yeah.
Right. You know, basically, Neil was the hood ornament on the Chrome Zephyr that came floating through, or not floating, but wafting, shall we say, through American culture.
Well, you guys have a road show part of the time.
Oh yeah.
Pretty heavy. Again, they broke from their families. He was the father figure, but also he was the model for they followed in his footsteps. They're saying, like a traditional family, you know, a traditional family in an old world, you're going to base your life on your fathers. So for Neil Cassidy, we based our lives, and our children, the Grateful Dead followers, are following as we based our lives on this father figure. And there's lots and lots that we could unpack that more, but I don't know if you want to chime in on that at all.
Well, you know, he spent a lot of time in prison, didn't he?
He sure did.
You know, so what was the appeal to Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and, Ken Kesey? What was the interest in this guy that made him a key figure in their books? I mean, this guy is a washout troublemaker. I mean, is that what made him so appealing, that he was such a dirtbag?
Well, let's go back. There's a couple different stages, right? By the time Ken Kesey encountered Neil Cassidy, he was pretty much, in his late 30s. He was a burnout. Most of the other beats had either moved on and reached sort of positions in society, had become recognized or whatever. Or, Jack Kerouac basically wasted away at his mom's house, drinking himself to death.
And at Daniel Pinchbeck's mom's house as well, at Joyce Glassman's house, Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Kerouac blames his downfall on a night when Allen Ginsberg dosed him with a synthetic form of mescaline. He said he never recovered from that and never felt the same.
Was that, I wonder, the same mescaline that Howard Blair, the tennis pro, was killed? Who was, now I'm forgetting, one of the MK Ultra doctors killed Howard Blair, the tennis pro, with some massive dose of synthetic mescaline that he obviously didn't recover from.
Yeah. Well, let me just explain to you why Neil Cassidy in the 40s was such an important figure. So, Jack Kerouac was someone, Thomas Wolfe was a great writer, wrote a book, Look Homeward Angel. And he had this very powerful style of prose, even though he was considered a anti-Semite, and we can't read his books. But Thomas Wolfe, Kerouac idolized his way of writing and also his ability to, to sort of go to the marrow of life without fear. These guys were at Columbia. So when they met Neil Cassidy sort of they were in the academic kind of area. Kerouac was a football player and stuff, but you have these kind of armchair intellectuals that are starting this literary movement. Now, again, we could, Burroughs, later. I mean, I am not going to make a standpoint that necessarily like say Kerouac from the beginning, whether this or that. I think there's certainly these guys were shifted, but in that idealistic stage, they suddenly meet this guy who's ultra handsome, who parties all the time, can have any woman he wants with a snap of his fingers, totally confident, but also uneducated, right? So he's kind of like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the primordial man, so at that stage. But as he mentions, Kerouac saw him as a child, right? So he also was kind of this primitive, this innocent, right? So there's a very big distinction between, early Neil Cassidy, and as Dean Moriarty in On the Road, who represents this burning out, right? The Kerouac talks about the candle, the fireworks. Everyone says, "Aw," you see they live their life like this firework going off, and everyone says, "Oh, that was beautiful," but then they're dead and gone. So, but Neil Cassidy hung on. And he was, and at that point, he was just taking massive, massive doses of amphetamines all the time. He would be up for days and days at a time. And they're imputing to him some sort of a godlike consciousness where you could talk, you can listen to him talk. He just jumps all over the place. You have to decipher what he says with, 50 footnotes. You talk about ADD on steroids. But so, again, he did represent in that way the movement from the Beat generation, which again started as sort of a semi or a serious literary movement, quote unquote, that moved into the whole 1950s counterculture. At the same time, they're idolizing, what they call the hopheads, the jazz culture with cannabis and heroin, for that matter. But what he's talking about is how that Beat generation set off the entire waveform of social transformation. Let me just play one last quote on Neil Cassidy for the Dead.
Modeled after like old style big families like you would find in Mexico or in Spain or in Europe or something like that, where you have a paterfamilias.
Paterfamilias. Again, Neil Cassidy is a paterfamilias. Neil Cassidy is, for example, if you have, say Jose Cuervo tequila, that guy's picture and name on there is the paterfamilias, and everyone is following in his footsteps, father to son, but they create a legacy that will last for generations. The only distinction is a Grateful Dead family is not limited to a small group, but it's supposed to become all of us eventually.
Yeah. Well, Jose Cuervo might be a bad example, but maybe Jose Cuervo de Familia is one of the higher end, but their stuff isn't even real tequila. Another thing I just noticed was Neil Cassidy was hanging out at this famous agent hangout, La Cucaracha, in San Miguel, Mexico, and Abby Hoffman, Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Ken Kesey, all of them were associated around this San Miguel location, as was the Mena, Arkansas drug trafficking. And you get James Truitt and other CIA operations happening out of this San Miguel location. Sorry to segue there, but I thought that was an important tidbit.
Yeah. Oh, the reason that example came to my mind is I was at a film festival recently. I had a film show in there, and it was sponsored by Don Julio Tequila, right?
Okay.
So, and we had to watch this 20-minute film, which was actually very well done, about how it started, father to son. It was all about the family tradition and growing the agave, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why the first example. But that was an example of an old world family, right? But the thing was, this type of family, right? I mean, the first thing that's happening, let me just explain this alchemical process right here, directly in front of us, is that On the Road is this model of driving across America, right? On the road, and it's also the automobile post-war culture, cheap gasoline, American prosperity, right? And this idea of driving your car, going anywhere you want, freedom, right? Neil Cassidy as the driver of the Merry Pranksters bus, the crazed bus driver who would drive for days at a time like a complete maniac, totally wired on speed. And so he was driving, going the opposite direction from West Coast to East Coast, spreading LSD across the country and ushering in this new social transformation from the other direction of society. So you can see this, you could call it a metaphorical or a link by analogy, but it's there, right there.
Hold on a second, though, Hans, because what you're describing, and I've kind of noticed this too, having spent several weeks, 2 or 3 weeks in Woodstock doing research, is that, Millbrook is about 40 minutes from Woodstock, and you have Esopus Island there where Aleister Crowley amalgamates the OTO and all of these secret societies and launches the intel community, essentially. And then you have this Western progression or spread from Crowley and Woodstock and the Maverick and Joseph Campbell and these other Satanists in the Woodstock region, spreading out, going towards the West. And then you have it like hit the West Coast and bounce back with Kesey and Neil Cassidy, bringing it back east, and then going to the Millbrook Mansion.
Exactly. Tying into Billy Mellon Hitchcock, which goes into all kinds of stuff in England and these different, there's a whole bunch of stuff with that, which I don't even want to crack that can of worms open. But exactly. And as I mentioned, individual psychological level, but look at this. It almost seems like it was scripted. I mean, I don't, On the Road was something, again, but it's also, okay, I would say, On the Road was, coming from Thomas Wolfe again, but it was this fulfilling the destiny, right? Going to the true character, becoming a man in this modern industrial world. How do you do that? But you do it by driving across the country, again, starting from Columbia University, growing across the country, right? And then, of course, from there, then these guys end up staying in San Francisco. Allen Ginsberg, all these guys, of course. And then, but again, Neil Cassidy was also the driver and On the Road. And then the bus further, he's the driver of the Merry Prankster's bus. So it's not a literary allusion. It is, we see a direct link. And the fact is, the Grateful Dead, why are they citing him? I mean, maybe Ken Kesey is a better father figure than Neil Cassidy. Ken Kesey, was a successful author, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, Neil Cassidy at that point was a shell. I mean, I would say a shell of a man, but, again, absolutely burned out speed freak sadomasochist who was trying to, it's kind of a sad, he was an adult adolescent. He was still trying to relive his youth. He never grew up, and he spent many years in jail. Again, he had all kinds of different things. But he was a very troubled man. But he also it was kind of sad. He became the clown. Like people always had to be laughing at him. He always had to be the life of the party. Like the old guy who's still trying to be there, hanging out and is, with the kids. And that's basically what he was. And by the end, people were ignoring him. And he finally just walked off into the desert and just died. Was basically committed suicide. Unless he was assassinated. But so it's again, it's more than just, this is, whether or not the utilization of this symbolism came later, one would have to think. But, it's quite interesting. Again, with this east to west, the transformation of directions. But sorry, Jan, I wanted to state that what you said about the Millbrook and all these this is a metaphor or a model for an individual journey, a literary journey, and a social movement journey, and an institutional journey, and a spread of knowledge, right? And it is a mirror, as above, so below. We see these different things. And another direction is this. Is that people that start out reading On the Road in high school, they start out reading that, they can be led from On the Road to reading Tim Leary to get into LSD. So for more intellectually minded youth, they can On the Road then you have the Yage letters, William S. Burroughs. And so you have another way you can go from being, seeing this literary movement as a model, and then you go from listening to jazz and snapping your fingers to dropping LSD and becoming a deadhead. So this can even happen in contemporary sense, and it's still there. This model is still in place, and it's still working as we speak. This didn't just die out. As Jerry said, we're still on this journey, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's move on.
And now we're creating the opposite wave going through it to retransform society away from this satanic alchemy and to help, protect the family and the future that they want to enslave and destroy with this so-called alchemical evolution, or their alchemical gold is the ultimate slave, essentially.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the alchemical gold is that they themselves become like gods. They become godlike And if they have to melt away.
I get the joke now. I got it. So they manufacture themselves into gods.
Yeah, but by destroying society. But then at the same time,
and then all the people that are victims of it, talk about the ultimate Stockholm syndrome, then turn around and worship these people like McKenna, Leary, Jerry Garcia, Jim Morrison. Name your demon.
Well, but another part of it is, again, this is not just, it's a material process, it's a psychological process, it's a social process, and you could say a spiritual process, but also the debasement of society is an important part of that. So the more people become involved in orgiastic sex, begin to go into a totally amoral universe, the more debased society is, the more elevated the
Hans, you do realize that you're opening up a historical can of worms with that, and the review of every ancient god, Greek and Hindu, and you name it across the board, and these gods of sex and Bacchus and Pan and all the rest of it. Did they become famous because of their degradation of society? Is that how they got elevated to the position of saint and godhead? I mean, it's wow. Sorry, go ahead. I just had to throw that out there.
Yeah. Well, I told you, man, this stuff can go in all directions. But let's listen. Let's just go a little further. Let's listen to Jerry and Mr. Bob Weir talking about this a little more.
Started making other families. Now I guess there's a popular resurgence in between the coasts, where the American model nuclear family is attempting a comeback. And I guess there was a working model. For some reason it did work for most of the century, where you had the Cleaver family, for instance, as a model, and
dad out working, mom at home and
all that kind of stuff, and the kids are raised up for like 15 years.
And probably actually didn't last all that long at all, really.
Well, don't you think the reason that we're also fascinated with the Cleavers is because we knew that was going to blow? This was like the last frame of that illusion.
Yeah, well, that was all they could do to keep those kids in.
Ward, I'm worried about the beaver.
Right.
It's the classic line.
Right,
of course she's worried about the beaver.
Sure.
He's about to move to San Francisco and blow his mind.
Absolutely.
Where everything, you watch the show, everything, Ozzy and Harry, it's the same way, everything.
Okay, they go on and on, bashing this nuclear family, saying it only, and this is whatever, 1990, it only lasted maybe 15 years during the entire 20th century, the nuclear family model. And then notice they're saying, when we get a little further in, we'll see how they deal with the attempted resurgence of nuclear families in the Midwest, right? But the East and West Coast, nuclear family is dead.
Flood it with drugs and rock music.
I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, they're pretty vicious. I mean, I have like 10 minutes or 15 minutes of them bashing the nuclear family model and how it's repressive and whatever. But I mean, what do you think about that? That's pretty cavalier.
Well, yeah, it's very cavalier, and it's like here are these clowns, a bunch of CIA agents and various other. Working for the CIA and various intelligence agencies, which is obviously a totalitarian top-down control system, talking about the nuclear family and extended family, which is the only thing that can survive against government and these socialist control systems, and they're intentionally targeting this, and then they're creating this transient hippie family that you see in the burner community and throughout the communes of the 60s, etc., where these people are just transient in and out. There's no steady place, no real people that you can rely on. And then all of these groups always collapsed because those that actually worked got tired of all of the lazy asses feeding off of them, and then these systems collapsed time and time again. And you saw this in the Soviet Union and in every other communist situation, and now they're trying to bring this globally, but they're using tiptoe totalitarianism to bring it in so that people don't see that it's the same crap that they did in Russia with the Bolshevik Revolution when they murdered 60, 70 million people. They're just doing it in a soft style. Now, that's what the Fabian socialists like Huxley and the rest were all about. They looked at the situation that Trotsky and Lenin and Stalin did with the Jewish Bolshevik Revolution, murdering 60, 70 million people. And then they said, you know what? We've got to find a softer, kinder, more gentler way of introducing our totalitarian system. And so then they sell it, and then they sell the family as the problem. The only reason why the family is a problem is because it stands up to them. It stands up to the elite caste. It stands against communism and socialism and these manufactured, social creations. A family, you leave them alone, they can progress and do their thing for centuries, without any interruption. When I lived in Europe, the young generation would build a new house in the front, and as when the old generation died, the next generation tore that house down and built a new house there, and then they would rotate the property with a new house and an old house, and this went on for centuries and centuries, where they tended the land, and they might have 10, 15, 20 extended family members living there. This totally self-sustained unit with their cattle and their pigs and their chickens and their crops and their the cats to take care of the mice, the dogs to herd the sheep, etc. I mean, everybody worked, everybody contributed, so this is what they're after because it doesn't need them. So they have to attack that and say it doesn't work when it's clear that it's their biggest fear.
Absolutely. And just give one example. Like right now, the wealthiest immigrant community, I think they're much wealthier than me, Mr. Privileged, white American with the highest successful suicide rate now of white males, whatever. But Indians are the most, from India, are the most successful immigrant group. They have very strong extended family structures. The children take care of their parents. We throw our parents in old folks' home. The parents throw their kids out of the house. But even they're saying that even if if there's something wrong with you, if you have a family, if you respect your parents, there's something wrong with you. And they're mocking it, right? This idea that only in the 20th century and now in the 21st century, only a period of about a decade and a half did the family structure function at all. And they're trying to bring it back in the Midwest. I mean, but again, if the whole thing of this, does it feel good?
Right, but the issue is they wouldn't be so concerned about the family if their statements were factual. Obviously the family is the biggest threat of all to them.
Yeah. Well, let's move on
all
with
right,
the Grateful Dead and how they work on this attempted resurgence of the family in the Midwest.
If we have if there are many deadheads in town or whatever, we represent a sizable amount of influence there. Some towns we bring in enough money to keep the town from falling over. We provide enough economic strength for that weekend or whatever it is that just pushes that community over its what it needs. There's enough people buying.
Yeah, that's right. Monterey just lost $1 billion a year with Fort Ord.
Yeah.
Right. So do you think they'll let you go back to Laguna Seca?
I think they're gonna because
our
our biggest problem down there was the army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the local merchants didn't have a great need to have some money come in.
No.
Well, a lot of...
Okay, so listen to that. They're talking about, and I'll get some more clips on this, how they represent a sizable social influence in small town America. They keep the town afloat. They keep the small town going. And they're talking about pressuring the city of Monterey to get money because they don't want the Grateful Dead. Oh, no, now they need the money. So we're going to pressure them. That financial pressure they're exerting on that. But notice he says a sizable influence. And remember, we talked about what do you think of the small town America? Midwest. Leave it to Beaver.
Well, Hans, the best example I can think of again is Woodstock itself, where they kicked all this shit off, is that, Woodstock is totally sustained on the Woodstock hippie tourism and selling bongs and tie-dye T-shirts and glorifying the CIA and intelligence community's actions there, which then launched this ripple across the country. But the only way that Woodstock, New York has been able to sustain itself is by this tourist money, because they've pretty much wiped out the family and any natural growth there in the area. And all these, one thing that they do have in Woodstock is like a weekly or monthly several deaths, heroin addict deaths in, downtown. But that's about the only growth in numbers they got going on there, Thanks, CIA.
Yeah, and that, when you go to these beautiful small towns, like, throughout Ohio, I travel a lot, see these beautiful places with these, maybe, beautiful buildings, picturesque, and these represented this supposedly backbone of America. And if you look at, say, Walmart, as an example, Walmart comes in, shuts down all the local businesses, guts the town. But on the psychological level, again, we'll go back to our little alchemical model, as above, so below. You also make the people feel like they're missing something in life. They're stuck in their small town. They're stuck in this life. If you spend time, you've got a son, you spend time with your kid. Isn't there kind of almost a biological feeling of being centered when you're being a father, when you're doing this thing? When there's a naturalness, there's something, there's something called, what this is opposed to fundamentally is natural law.
Right.
Natural law, which is what you discussed. Natural law meaning, the organic.
Right. One thing when you're a parent, see, the goal is they have to keep the extended adolescence, the arrested development going, because as you know, Hans, you're a father. When you become a parent, your whole perspective changes. You have a whole higher level of understanding. And then as a grandparent, there's a whole other level of understanding, and a great-grandparent. So if you can keep people from ever being parents, they're going to stay in that state of extended adolescence. They're not going to become adults, so they don't understand anything. And so what happens is, if you can keep them in a state of extended adolescence, sucking their thumb and all this, baby crap, then what are they going to do but turn to, socialist, commie Clinton and these people to be their mommy and daddy figures? Hey, we got to live off the state, so, because when you become a parent, it should break that behavior. For most people, it does, unless you can sever the family and take the father out of the picture so that the family can't self-sustain. Then you can keep the mothers in the system, and then the state becomes the father figure itself.
Or Neil Cassidy.
Or Neil Cassidy, right.
And just,
Larry Harvey at Burning Man, or, any of these clowns,
But also this idea of, the father, there's another model. I'll be real brief on this. Dr. Spock on Star Trek. Dr. Spock, the child rearing expert, where you can't have any authority. You let the kids do whatever they want. This hands-off parenting. And then you have to be like one of the guys, right? So you're out there, and there's how many, you're out there. Now, it's great to bond with your kids, but you're afraid to show any authority. You're out there, going to the, putting on your tie-dye, going to the rock concert with your son, and just, hanging out there, not saying you can't participate and do stuff. I obviously you should, but I'm saying that this idea of even having a type of authority, and then the adult male is trying to be like the kid. He's trying to connect and bond.
Right. And instead of teaching family values and structure and things that you can use to build a real life and your own, this is what they accuse of, men patriarchy or whatever. It's, when in actuality it may be matriarchy, because, when there's the family structure and the man has the woman and these two are working together, suddenly you get this force between the man and the woman. That's the creative force, the force of God, in fact, when they create children, etc. And but this force working together can accomplish so much more in life, and building a real unit together. So this is what they fear, but at the same time, they're working for the elites who are only worried about losing their own piece of the pie to the rest of us. And so if they can break and shatter that down as far as possible, they can maintain their own control. Let's go to the next clip here.
Okay.
Hope we didn't segue too far there.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Well, a lot of the people who show up who are increasingly part of a problem. I mean, the problem is that communities in a lot of America, as you know, are pretty nailed down tight.
Yeah.
And when you come to town, it represents, you know, all those weird kids who wanna get into chaos and crack that stuff up, and they're normally controlled. Here's a context where they can get together, and they're sick of their old family.
Right.
They've got this real hunger for, okay, I don't have a ticket to the show, but I can go hang out.
Right.
And then there are the people for whom that represents a big threat.
That's true. Well,
and they come into conflict. But at the center of it, don't you think that there's a real...
See, the real truth is the family is the threat to them, but they're pretending that these children are the threat to the other group. So, you know, they're even flipping it right in there. Sorry, go ahead.
But no, he said the audience is invoking. They're talking about how they're disrupting the social fabric of small town America.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just referring to who he was saying the threat was. You know, the family is the threat to who was that? Osley speaking?
Yeah.
You know,
no, the family is the threat. No, I mean the entire social order.
Right.
It's a threat to the entire social order, and they want to play with chaos. They're talking
literally. But see, he's saying that these kids want to play with chaos. If the kids knew what these clowns were up to, and if they were aware of the dialogue that we're having here, they wouldn't want to. Most kids wouldn't want to participate in this crap if they saw, what these destructive, psychopathic Satanists were attempting to create.
Yeah, but right there, directly called out. This represents a threat to the social order, to the community. And again, we're talking about transforming a small segment of society and breaking down the whole thing. Let's just go on here, because this is kind of what the goal is right here. Now, next clip is the goal.
I mean, there's the Grateful Dead family, and there are Grateful Dead families.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
They meet at the moment where the music happens.
We are part of a larger community, which is the community of deadheads.
Well, it's a sort of it's not so neo-feudal. It's pretty much straight feudal scene.
You know what? Wow.
Whereby.
You know what?
Yeah.
And we've been, in our Manufacturing the Deadhead article, we called this out that it was, the creation of a neo-feudalist society, and they just damn admitted it right there.
But no, let it keep going. That's what I'm saying. And when I said that, when we hit this stuff, when I called this laying the dead to rest, not neo-feudal, a straight feudal scene. Okay.
Yeah, I did hear that, but yeah, I mean, we nailed it, and they admit it.
Okay. Yeah, but this is them talking about it. So okay.
Yeah, we're a service organization. A family like this 100 years ago, or even now, for instance, in say Malaysia, if we were ranchers, let's say we were ranchers 200 years ago in old California, we would have, we'd be a service organization of sorts. We'd be providing, beef, hides, and tallow for a lot of people. And incidentally, there would be our individual families at this point, because we'd have had a couple hundred or 100 years or so to split up the huge ranch into ranch heads.
Right.
So we're supporting our own families, and then beyond that, there are the people who work under us, the Indians, for instance, and all that kind of stuff, who we're responsible for. The top, the nucleus of the family is responsible in the end for the people that they never see. Like, for instance, the people that we never see are the T-shirt vendors or the people who follow us around who incidentally make their living off of what we do. We have to make controls over them so that they don't get out of line, so that they don't make it impossible for us to continue to travel and do what we do.
Yeah, because we are not completely autonomous. At some point or another, our boundaries run into the boundaries of the exterior reality as they're running it out there.
Right.
So we run into the law. You know, I mean, the things that we don't own and don't have control, or the weather, yes.
Well,
stuff that we have no control over.
You know, like way back when, with the old model, we had to make sure that the Indians who you know, planted the corn or whatever, kept our gardens going and stuff like that, were adequately fed and sheltered and seen to, so that they could continue to work happily for us, which in turn means that they're working for the nuclear family.
And that's Bob Weir and was that Bob Weir and Jerry?
Yeah. It's Bob Weir. So they're saying that. So it's a feudal state talking about the people working for them are like the Indians working on the land. He directly says they're like the Indians. When a colonial power, Indians are slaving away on the banana plantation. And so, I mean, I don't think you can get any more direct than that. I mean, you know, it somehow he slips into the nuclear family there. I don't know exactly. He may have gotten a little off. But, I mean, you want to talk about calling it out and saying directly that we're creating this family model. We're the nucleus of the family, but they're dependent on us. You know, there are little Indian slaves out there working in the field while we're sitting in our mansions.
Well, you know, and that would basically be all the people selling beads and LSD in the parking lot of the Grateful Dead, following them around like idiots, you know?
And that's what he said. But then he said, just like there's a big ranch, and then 100 years ago, and that ranch would split off into several smaller ranches. He's talking about the proliferation of this model, you know, into different groups, into different bands with their followings, into all kinds of stuff.
Welcome Fish, welcome the rest of it. You know, Terrence McKenna, Leary, all the rest of them out promoting their own little segment of the ranch, right?
Yep. Okay, let me just another here. I think this is Bob again.
Those kids, those happy little, you know, those smiling little cherubs went way weird.
Right.
Well, he's just saying that basically the cherubs went weird, right? He's saying what happened when we come to town, the parents, I'll put that in context, the family structure, right? The parents, these little smiling little kids, your happy little boy, suddenly, like my friend I described, goes from there to, you know, to driving around in a minivan selling LSD and ends up a homeless bum with a fried brain. But that's the cherubs going weird. Like, it's really cool. I mean, yeah, there's probably a lot of people that fall to dead or just fine, but there's a lot of people that have gone down the drain. But notice they're talking about dismantling small communities. And when that earlier quote, there's a residual thing of this nuclear family. And then they're saying they're going to town, but then they're creating this neo-feudal model, this feudal model. So, I mean, I don't know how much more direct you can get about them talking about what they're doing and embracing it. What do you think, Jan? I mean, I think it's kind of wild.
I think, you know, Bob Weir and Gloria Steinem and the rest of these people ought to be put on trial for treason. You know, that's what I think.
But normally they're not going to admit this. This is what's fun about this.
Right. Well, now we've got them. I mean, we've got them busted. We have the evidence. We've laid out everything for the last 2 years, Hans. We've got them.
Yeah. Well, let me just keep going. This is about the transformation of the entire nation.
Right. Who have met that works.
Yeah.
Because there are all kinds of craziness that we've all seen, which has destructed.
Yeah.
And fallen apart along the way.
Well, we're hoping that it works. I mean, we're involved in a society which is undergoing some really weird changes now. Right now, America is under the gun. It's being tested. You know, I think, and the Constitution is being co-opted in a big way. And this whole thing of the war and all this stuff is just, I think that America is in danger of losing its adventurous spirit in the cause of some kind of illusion of safety, or
And I'd like to point out,
substitute law and order there. Or
right?
whatever.
I'd like to point out that.
Yeah, or how about, LSD in that dream? Never mind the in-your-face irony of Jerry's statement there.
Yeah, I think that he must be talking about the first Gulf War, maybe the Yugoslavia. Let me just keep.
And I was there and living in Belgrade during that whole fucking fiasco.
Yeah. Let me play the rest of this clip here real quick.
But our, if you look at our, our stats, we haven't lost any more than any other large group.
Hell yeah.
And by and large, the people in our group, in our family, are enjoying life a fair bit more than most other people.
Yeah, that's right.
And we have cultural depth. We get all kinds of stuff to chew on, to live on.
Yeah.
Well, that's
it's going to Homo Ludens, dude. His quality of life is just about people high in a dream state partying, following them around, doing absolutely nothing productive. It's the fun people, the party people, Homo Ludens,
Yeah, but notice how he juxtaposes the war and the Constitution, and then he goes from that, America is in danger of losing its spirit of adventure. So this is their anecdote to, whatever the war and all this stuff is fun. Let me just play the last 6 seconds of this. Is there anything left in it?
Yeah, there's a lot there to enlarge you.
So they're saying, but within that, they say, well, compared to any other large family, we haven't had any statistically higher anyone dying or anyone having ill effects from being part of our family. In fact, we're lower, and in fact, we're much better off, and we're much happier, and we're much more developed. But I think that takes a little bit of balls to say that when you're the largest LSD distributors in for decades,
and you have a whole bunch of mind-controlled zombies following you around, like, wow, let me join up with your family, Jerry. You're really empowering people there.
But notice how they say, I just love that juxtaposition. Again, a war and police state, but America is in danger of losing its sense of fun and freedom. And then they're saying that there's been no casualties. There's no people that have not fulfilled their lives by following you guys around. Yeah, there's corporate executives that will take their little weekends and go out there. But how many people, I don't want to go into the personal examples that I know, but I could just go on and on. But how many people that we know personally could have actually had a productive life in their lives? Even if they get out of that directly, they're never the same again. They're never functioning, and they've sort of rewired their brains to pushing that little button like the monkey for their little pleasure reflex that they can't get enjoyment out of anything else unless they're tripping balls and they're like having an orgy or something. Life is boring. Life sucks, man. Yeah. So you lose the value in going outside, seeing the sun, knowing that, you're, as you described, the traditional family, where there's a depth of satisfaction that, you're not, even if you keep blowing your mind and need these super ecstatic rituals just to balance yourself, then you're going to be unable to ever function and take pleasure in what gives real pleasure, that instead of fucking you up, excuse my French, will actually is life sustaining and allows a natural process of growth. Yeah.
Let's go to the next clip.
Okay.
Get around to it.
In that it's almost a ritual. Is like a ritual thing, more than. Us like soulful getting down together. It's just way too many people, but it's one of those things that gives people strength. It provides people with a lot of strength. Just even if they just come and say hello, once a year on New Year's Eve to check in and see what it's doing, and for some people, it's important.
Okay, well, right now we're going to go into the one. We went through the aspect of the family. Now we're going to look at the ritual, the religious aspect. So the replacement of not only social values but religious values, right? So I'll just play some stuff like this. Another thing talking about how the Dead Show is like a ritual. And it's not only, we talked about the alchemical ritual, but also replacing ritual cycles, right? So you have natural cycles of the season. You have, we talked about this in depth in our music and mind control episodes. So let me just play some another thing, them talking about their ritual. But notice how they say it's so positive. People come out and they see us. It just makes their lives great. And maybe it does. But here we go.
They need something to celebrate. They need a context in which to celebrate things. They need something that fills the void that's left by the bankruptcy of religion and so forth. They need real. Joe Campbell used to talk about this stuff. There's a need for a ritual, and for real joy, and real bliss, real fun.
And there always have been small road shows.
Yeah.
Provide that, and they're always regarded by the local authorities
with some suspicion.
With a lot of suspicion.
Yeah, right.
So they're creating joy. They're offering rituals. They're offering sanctity. They are a religion and a family.
Hence, so what they do is they manufacture this false religion where they keep everybody in a dream state, high on LSD. They're the leading distributors of the LSD. They got Joseph Campbell, whom we've already exposed extensively, helping create the mythos, and then they alchemically transform themselves into gods. I mean, talk about sick psychopaths. Like, holy shit.
But notice how patronizing they are.
Well, but an extreme megalomania, like out of control. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but just one point. Yeah, they're talking about these poor lost souls, and we're there to provide them. They don't explicitly call them.
Well, sorry to, Hans. They're taking them out of one of Plato's caves, and they're ushering them directly into another Plato's cave.
Yep. And now let's look at the cave they're putting them into. Here we go.
Iconography is if you've got a little decal on your car that's got a little wheel and roses.
Yeah.
Nobody except those people in that particular extended family know what the heck that's about.
That's true.
That's true. You identify, it's sort of like the Masons. Or whatever. You identify yourself to one another in unusual circumstances.
Like the old Christian symbol that you would draw with your foot in the dirt while you were talking to somebody. You'd draw that fish thing.
Yeah.
That fish symbol, and if they noticed it, if they knew what they were looking at, then they knew that you were one of them.
Right. I mean, I'm sure you've all had this experience. It's completely unexpected people.
Absolutely.
I went to buy a car, and the car salesman was a classic car salesman guy.
Right.
What did he notice? Something
dead, directly referencing Masons, the hidden symbolism that you're part of this secret society, this inner sect. Talking about early Christians, but also talking about esoteric or hidden cults that are working to transform society. But just saying, just like the Masons, you can see the Grateful Dead sticker.
I'm going to insert right here Bob Weir bragging about his membership at Bohemian Grove and the Bohemian Club.
What insights can you share with us about your performance at the Bohemian Grove?
Well, I'll tell you what. I don't talk much about the Bohemian Grove because, it's a place that people go to get away from the spotlight. A lot of relatively well-known guys are members of that club. Basically, it was founded 130 years ago or so. by artists and writers, for artists and writers, and still, in order to get in, you have to have something to offer in that regard. A lot of the members are, successful entrepreneurs or businessmen of one sort or another, but they all have an artistic bent. The stuff you hear about it in the rumor mill is, while entertaining, I've never caught any virginal sacrifices. Anything kind of remotely like that. He's had some interesting times up there. And there are a lot of movers and shakers in that club, and I enjoy the chance, given my mindset, my Weltschmerz, if you will. I enjoy a chance to get together with those guys and knock a couple back and talk it down. One time I spent a weekend up there. I ran into a guy named General Bill Quinn, and we had a couple drinks together. We were sitting in front of a fireplace, and we just started telling. We fell in together, and we started telling war stories. He was the guy that Hermann Goering surrendered, not his sword, but basically it was a mace. He surrendered he sought out Bill Quinn, Wild Bill Quinn, who was also the original head of the OSS, which became the CIA. He was a very, very interesting guy. And we just went back and forth. We had a crowd of people gathered around us at all times. And we'd about late afternoon, we'd wander onto the deck where the fireplace was, sit down, grab a couple of drinks, and just start going back and forth. That kind of stuff, these kinds of meetings and stuff like that are only going to happen there. Or, it's the only place where you can almost be assured of, where I can almost be assured of meeting folks like this. So it's a great opportunity for me. It's also a great club. There's a sort of an unwritten but hard and fast rule for membership: no jerks. And they have an entrance committee that they can sniff them out.
Yeah, and the thing is, you can add so many other elements to that. But I mean, and okay, let's look at this now. Okay, this is now talking about now we've looked a little bit on the external aspect of the Dead Show as a ritual. It's seasonal. It gives people joy. Now let's look at as it works on the consciousness, at least in the words of the Dead.
For us in the band, it's like bardos. It's just each element that away from each thing that has to do with the individual and his relationship to his instrument and to the music is like a series of things that you go to, and you get to the level now where the whole band is now at one level, and then there's new levels you go to, and you know what I mean?
Yes.
But each one, you have to go through each step each time.
Sometimes it takes will, and sometimes it takes abandoning will.
Right. Sometimes it takes innocence. Sometimes it takes guile. Sometimes you have to be clever.
Okay, they're talking about the performance as going through the Tibetan bardos, which are the stages that you cross when you die, right? So the Tibetans believe that the material spirit sort of stays around the corpse for 2 weeks or something, and that turn they're going through all these stages, which goes to death. So these bardos are these different stages, like the realm of the hungry ghost, like all this stuff, and they're saying the band themselves are going through these spiritual stages. The last thing he said, sometimes it takes innocence, sometimes it takes guile. But this is psychological, spiritual, alchemical transformation. We've seen the external aspect. Now this is the interior transformation that they are actually acknowledging they're doing and are doing it deliberately, but also seeing it as a great thing. I don't know if you want me to You want to chime in there?
No,
Hey,
I'm waiting for you to hit play on the next clip.
Okay, here we go.
I was lost in thought,
Kind
waiting
of
for the
it's
next
a
part.
Shared, well, it's the Joseph Campbell. It's your little tiny hero's journey in
That's right.
everyday
It's your
life.
rite of passage.
And it's hard to
I
find.
use the war stories metaphor too, which is
Right,
it's part of the adventures that shape our character and give us stuff to talk about.
And where do you get adventures anymore?
Hard
in
to
America.
get. There's almost no place.
I mean, we have a society that's trying to make sure that nobody gets any adventures because adventures are dangerous.
Yeah.
And danger is bad.
Yeah.
And I mean nobody's ever the rule is not written anywhere. It's not etched in any. But I mean that's the prevailing attitude of this entire society. Danger is bad. Oh no, don't do that. Don't have an adventure. That's dangerous.
Right.
And I mean your parents are always trying to get you to be careful when you were a kid, and that's just. It's pervasive, all pervasive in
because it's bad for parents to look out for their children. But, what they're not saying is that Joseph Campbell was working at the Maverick in Woodstock, hanging out with Aleister Crowley, was a hardcore Satanist, worked with the intelligence community, and helped, was the foundation behind Changing Images of Man for the Stanford Research Institute, created this whole false New Age religious system that they base everything on. And as Steve Outram exposed so diligently in the Burners series with him that we're still working on, the hero's journey is a false manufactured journey that they're selling to the public. So every aspect that they're talking about here is false.
But then they're comparing taking a drug that you can take LSD once and be tripping the rest of your life.
And it's a false, but again, it's a false journey that they're manufacturing, and then they're referring back to Joseph Campbell. The whole thing is false. When you know that Campbell was dirty, when you know the intelligence connections behind all of this stuff, you can see the whole agenda.
Yeah, well, I'll finish this clip here, but since we chimed in there, but notice the real danger is that people are afraid of danger. So you're, again, the parental authority. So your parents tell you not to go play in the street, you'll get hit by a car.
Your average, exactly. And you got to be the fearless psychonaut. It's like Kesey throwing people off the bus who couldn't take the trip well enough. You have to be entirely reckless. And, no scruples for your well-being or your families. And then this is what they're calling adventure.
Yeah, let me finish this clip here.
And there's a certain ilk, there's a certain kind of person who just, can't live life like that.
No, everybody needs adventure, and everybody needs something.
Maybe
to
not
enlarge
everybody
their
does. I don't know, but I do.
I think an awful lot of people do. I think a lot of people do. I mean, maybe not everybody.
Well,
I don't really
some
know.
people think that that's what's attractive to men about warfare, is where else do you find people where you absolutely know you can trust them?
Yeah.
Because you have.
We have to.
And all of that is, everything is removed. You get on you're actually doing something dangerous when you get in your car.
Yeah.
You're getting on an airplane.
Oh.
Sex.
All of life.
Everything is dangerous.
Dangerous.
But we pretend that it's not.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. That's
Right.
true.
But to willingly participate in an adventure which has danger, that has to do with getting together with your fellows to celebrate,
right,
has a certain fraternity to it,
That's
which
true.
I think
crazy.
irradiates in all directions.
The International Brotherhood of Crazies, because the pervasive attitude is that it's crazy to invite more danger into your life.
Yeah, right.
And we don't look at it like that. We're just inviting adventure into our life, and adventure carries a little baggage.
Yeah, that's right.
But most people, from what I can see, make the logical step that Well, you're inviting adventure, you're inviting danger, and inviting danger is crazy. And so you have what we have is this international brotherhood of crazies.
Yeah, I do a little head bob.
I think they call that the Merry Pranksters in the Cacophony Society.
Yeah, but again, the thing is, yes, probably we need more. Do we need more danger? I mean, and then to see they're comparing. Okay, they're talking about this, like a war. You have your band of brothers, so they're saying, your band of brothers at the Dead show, is like your fellow psychonauts, your fellow cosmic journeyers. But again, I mean, even if you have a physical injury, even if you get your leg blown off, you lose your mind. You're worse than dead. And steal your face right off of your head. That means take your identity, take your mind, take your consciousness. But then, we're just a bunch of fuddy-duddies. We're a bunch of old fuddy-duddies who don't know how to we're afraid of danger. We're afraid of fun. I mean, anyways, you can throw some in there if you'd like.
Well, it goes back to the whole idolizing of James Dean in the 1950s and the reckless behavior there, and then you just follow the same pattern. And who knows? I'm sure they had it going before that, but it's the same pattern of the promotion of reckless as being the hero, and it's the hero's journey.
But also, it's this idea, okay, how about a great explorer? Someone climbing a mountain. Okay, you could die climbing a mountain, but at least you're actually doing something. You're actually climbing a mountain. Right. Or you're exploring you're doing something in the world. You're going into a continent. I'm not saying, it's good to go and conquer people, but I mean, even when I did my field work, I lived up with this tribe, and they could have thrown me up, pushed me off the mountain or whatever. But that was the type of danger, but at least I was actually doing something. I wasn't just tripping out of my own mind with all my buddies thinking that I'm actually doing something. And it's, well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, tripping out with your buddies, looking down on everybody else because you're better than them, because you're high on drugs that they've marketed as entheogens. For those who've read my Entheogens What's in a Name article, and how they marketed that, because when they were schizophrenogens and psychotomimetics, nobody wanted to take them. So then when they named them psychedelics and entheogens, well, now you can have a hero's journey with it, and now you're manifesting your mind or generating God within. And boy, you're a pussy if you don't go far enough into that, right? But obviously, when they were calling them psychotomimetics and psychedelics, nobody wanted to participate in pushing how crazy you wanted to become. So they just simply remarketed it.
Yeah. And, Yana, I think that I still have like 22 more clips, so we could maybe hate to do a part 4, but I think we might have to.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the announcement of part 4. Don't forget that part 2 was the last part and part 3 was the last part. So part 4 may or may not be the last part.
Well, I do like it. It's kind of like an annotated text, where you read through a text and you give commentary. Yeah. Like you have a Buddhist text, and then you give commentary on the scripture. So we're giving commentary on the scripture of the Grateful Dead.
Well, they are a religion, and Jerry's a saint. So I mean, this is theology class, and so, ladies and gentlemen, there's more to the biblical analysis of the Grateful Dead and Saint Garcia and Bob Weir and Mickey Hart and the rest of their saintly diabolical diatribe.
Yeah, but what I enjoy about this is in that they're so direct about what they're doing, and they absolutely believe in it without any equivocation about what they're doing, even in terms of destabilizing the social fabric of America, whatever's left, and they're really proud of their part in doing that. So, hey, we got to have new religions, we got to have new rituals because our lives are so boring. So here we go, the void that created the manufactured void, here we go. But yeah, so I think I think that was an interesting journey, and we'll continue on our little bus further. Maybe we're going reverse on we're backing up Kesey's Magic School Bus or something. Or
yeah, I had a whole thing last year to do something like that from Woodstock and do a whole reverse ritual to undo their shit. Unfortunately, it didn't work, but who knows? Maybe one day I'll still pull that off.
Yeah. But I just want to say one thing. I made a quote that the Grateful Dead, Slayer compared to the Grateful Dead were a bunch of knitting grandmothers. The reason for that is that somebody who goes to a death metal show, somebody, even a band like Black Sabbath or other things, that occult stuff is there in the front. The Grateful Dead, happy-go-lucky, kind of superficial, kind of California vibe. The music is pretty innocuous, not even heavy distortion. They've got kind of a little country rock feel. So on the surface, it does not seem occult at all. If we start going into their whole symbolism and all that stuff, then it's apparent. But the fact is, as we'll go into this further, they're actually really doing it. They're not just talking about it. They're implementing all these things. And then once you peel back the layers of the onion, you see that these guys are way, way, way deeper into this occult stuff. And in fact, are actually doing this stuff on a ritual thing. They're not just dressing up in scary costumes.
You weren't really calling Slayer old grandma's knitting. You must have gotten somebody upset at you for making that. I thought it was rather humorous, and I got it, but.
Well, the reason I said that is because really, Slayer, it's all on the surface, right? It's all smoke and mirrors. It's shock value. Yeah, there may be something there, this and that happens. But when this is a group that, again, I knew all the pre-business majors were kind of Grateful Dead heads because it's kind of a superficial thing, in a certain way. You don't go there expecting some kind of being part of this massive, rolled out occult, social, psychosocial, psychobiological, transformative agenda. You go there to hear, let's go hear Uncle John's band. But then again, most of the lyrics are just going through one ear out the other. But the depth of the lyrics and all the occult references just go over the heads of most of the fans. But when they go into their receptive state with the psychotronic warfare sound system, and they're talking about almost sending out missionaries from the show. And if you got that religious reference, like the Masons, they have their little symbols, your little, skull with the roses on it or whatever it may be. They're sending out missionaries, like the early Christians would go and proselytize, that's. All right, man.
Well, and so you deadheads out there, yes, you are like the Christian proselytizers. And, we should thank the Dead and the CIA and everybody else for giving us such a wealth of information to expose for so long. And, I need to start reading fiction because I know they hide their crap in that too. But when you got stuff like this, it's hard to even want to read the fiction because you can't make this shit up. So, thanks to all the clowns at Langley and everywhere else for creating all of this work for us to, help expose and everything. And Hans,
go work on the Dead's plantation as an Indian. Talk about un-PC. Pick their corn. Go work it.
Yeah. Go pick the Dead's corn. And so Hans, your website.
I got two websites. hansutter.com and musicmindcontrol.wordpress.com. And, I've got some CDs, please help me out. I need to get a new toupee. Now I'm doing this. So most likely I'm not going to be going back to the Matrix, even though, like I said, every day I wake up and just bask in my white privilege, but,
I'm still waiting to get my white privilege. I haven't found it yet. Do you know where you're supposed to pick it up yet?
Well, I just realized that it's inherent, and so I wake up every day and I don't have to do anything. I could die now. That's why the suicide rate's so high because we got so much privilege. We're already in heaven. It's like I just wake up and say, I mean, I just love it. No,
Wow.
but we are all privileged to be alive and privileged, hopefully, to kind of help people get out of this. And just, one thing, just throwing that, I just read that book, A Scanner Darkly, reread it, but at the end, he does talk, he had the afterward, he says, the people, they went there to have a good time and didn't know the danger that they were in. So there's a lot of people that may not know the dead isn't around now, but the danger that this represented, as new manifestations of this come along, or as it's happening, we're just trying to reveal the danger and also reveal the fact that that level of condescension that, hey, your entire religious and social system has failed, and we're here to just to give you a new one. I mean, that's pretty pretentious. Yeah, but. Anyways, go ahead. Yeah.
Megalomania at its finest. So, all right, Hans, take care. See you soon for part 4. And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for that, and we'll see you soon. Take care.